Please be seated. We're continuing with the next session. And Johannes is going to talk about Python-based strategies for processing and visualizing high-resolution global human settlement data, right?
Right.
And so the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Hans-Jörg. So, yeah, let's get started. So I'll be talking about some applications of the global human settlement layer. So I work at the European Commission's Joint Research Center, which is located in Lombardy in northern Italy. And one of the projects of the JRC is the Global Human Settlement Layer, which is a project that has been going on since 2014. Global Human Settlement Layer, or short GHSL, is basically a data set that provides global, consistent, and open data on human settlements by mapping and modeling human settlements at a global scale for a time period of almost 50 years. Over 50 years, 55. 1975 to 2030, through the integrated use of Earth observation data from the Landsat and Sentinel sensors, census data and other geospatial data sets, combined with machine learning and other statistical modeling techniques. The aim of the GHSL is to support disaster risk management, exposure modeling, urbanization and population studies, monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals by means of so-called SDG indicators, and many other applications. So I don't want to go too much into detail here. It's just to kind of illustrate that the recent release of the GHSL 2023A basically contains of a wide range of different data sets. Some of them are multi-temporal, the blue ones, so from 1975 to 2020, and then extrapolated into the near future to 2030. Some of them are static, so they're just available for 1 year, which is 2018. You can see that there are some dependencies. There is kind of a hierarchical dependency between these data sets, so some of them depend on the other ones. So just to illustrate this kind of ecosystem. So here you can see some of the multi-temporal data sets, which are available at spatial resolution of 100 meter, also downsampled to 1 kilometer. Variables include the subpixel fraction of built-up surface, total building volume, disentanglement of residential and non-residential built-up areas, and there's the GHS POP, which is which measures resident population at 100 meter resolution, and there is the degree of urbanization, which is a consistent model of the rural-urban continuum. And besides those multi-temporal data sets, there are static data sets, so they are only available for one point in time, which is 2018, but some of them at a higher resolution. So there is the global subpixel built-up fraction data set at 10 meter resolution. There is an average height building data set at 100 meter resolution. And then there are two new data sets that are new in this current release of the data set, which are typologies of the built environment. One of them is the morphological settlement zone data set, and the other one is the BU type, a built-up typology. This morphological settlement zone data set contains 15 classes. You can see here examples for Dallas, Fort Worth in the US, and Lagos, Nigeria. So it basically contains information on residential and non-residential, and then disaggregation into different, or stratification into different building height classes. Then there are also intra-urban open spaces, such as parks, for example. They are additionally disentangled by their NDVI. There is intra-urban water and large roads. The other data set here is the built-up typology, which is available at 100 meter, and so it's spatially aggregated and also semantically a little bit. So still residential versus non-residential, and some vertical component expressed in number of floors. So this is kind of a quick overview of the data that has been produced in the Global Human Settlement Layer project over the last 10 years. And now, what is this talk actually about? So I want to start with some kind of more theoretical concept from information sciences in general, which is this DIKW pyramid. So the transformation from data to information, to knowledge, to wisdom, right? Which can be applied to many domains in general. So data are measurements, right? In this case, remote sensing data, so reflectance measurements, for example, if we work with multispectral data. Measurements are also census tables collected from various authorities from across the world, which are actually harmonized by CSIN, which is an institute that is affiliated, I think, with Columbia University in New York. So we receive these data sets, and then we convert the data into information, basically by giving them a meaning. For example, you can say in grid cell XY, there is that amount of built-up surface and that amount of people living in a given year, right? And then the next step would be to convert information into knowledge, for example. Or knowledge basically means we put information into context. So here we could say city X, population has doubled, whereas the built-up area has only grown by 20% in a given time period. And then the last step of this hierarchical schema would be converting knowledge into wisdom, which means basically to make decisions based on knowledge. And in this case, it could be a political decision from some planners to say, look, we need to prevent the establishment of new informal settlements in that neighborhood. And to do that, we have to do whatever, some planning measurement, right? So, and what we want to do, we basically don't only want to provide the data or the information, but also go a step further to kind of enhance or catalyze the conversion of information into knowledge to kind of support evidence-based policy, right? And we think that through data visualization and animation, and also filtering of that information by extracting relevant trends and disseminate such animations, for example, through web-based dashboards, social media, we can make the data more approachable to the general public on the one hand, but also to policymakers on the other hand. And basically for these 2 points at the bottom, I use a lot of Python, and I'd like to show some examples here. So the first thing, we talk about static maps, which can be nice for printing, but also for other, outreach media. So how would you produce this map? Of course, I can do it in QGIS, but I'm a Python fan. I'd like to automate things. I'd like to play around with class breaks and visualization techniques. So what I basically use is just pure matplotlib and basically PLT imshow for this. And the trick or the challenge is basically to find the right resolution. So we have this data set at 100 meter globally. Here I'm using the 1,000 meter downsampled data sets. And if I zoom in, I still want to preserve actually the spatial detail that is contained in the data. And this may sound trivial, but it's actually challenging when you use Python. So in imshow, in matplotlib, you probably know that you have these built-in interpolation methods And by default, there is an anti-aliasing interpolation method used. And what I commonly do, I would just deactivate that and use no interpolation, right? And instead, what I would do, I use some manual code that I wrote to kind of aggregate the data into block sums. So it's similar to, yeah, downsampling of the data set, and it's recording or summing up the pixel values within each block, right? But I don't use GDAL for that. I do it here just in NumPy. And then I would basically set the output dimension of the output image exactly to this resampled NumPy array. So this way, we can ensure and fully control the resampling that otherwise would be done, right, from converting from the NumPy array into the output image. And using this technique and overlaying different layers in Matplotlib using the imshow, we can generate then static maps that can be used for, as I said, for print media or for other outreach media. So here I overlay a water layer, which is also part of the global human settlement layer, which is mainly used, actually the water is not used, the land is used in order to obtain more accurate population density estimates, right? So I overlay this layer here and can produce these static maps. Okay, but that's static. That's also kind of boring. So let's move on to more animated visualization. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So those are indicators basically that measure, or that allow to measure quantitatively how the effects of the implementation of sustainable development goals or measures that are taken by policymakers. And one of these indicators is indicator 11.3.1, which is the ratio of land consumption rate to the population growth rate. And this is something that can be derived from the GHSL data directly. And what you can see here are basically the ingredients, right? So the built-up area over time, the population over time, and then this rural-urban continuum model, which is the degree of urbanization that basically classifies the territory into 7 classes from most rural to most urban land. And one effective way to kind of convey all this information into a single graph or graphic are these what we call settlement dynamic plots. So it's really just very simple horizontal bar charts in Matplotlib. So we have the time axis on the y-axis, the time component on the y-axis, and then to the right we plot population, and to the left we plot the built-up area in a given year for a given area of interest, which can be a city or a bounding box around a city, for example. Right, and then the colors represent how urban or how rural these fraction of that area of interest is. And what you can see here, for example, if you have this skew to the right, and that's something that you see often in the global south, that means population grows much more than the actual built-up area, right? And in this case, it's red, so that means it's predominantly urban population in Dhaka, Bangladesh, whereas in Venice, Italy, you see kind of an opposite trend. You see that the population almost stagnates, whereas built-up area still grows slightly, and the distribution along this rural-urban gradient is much more equilibrated. So we also have population in the rural domain. So what can we do with this? I mean, we can just plot it for an individual location or use it for a paper or whatever, but we can also kind of spatialize such an aspatial or non-spatial visualization. So what I did a while ago, I would basically subdivide the whole data set, which is, by the way, in Mollweide projection. So this is what you can see here. So we take the whole data set or the whole grid of our data set and divide it in blocks of 1,000 by 1,000 kilometers, and then we would basically generate such a plot for each kind of block of 1,000 by 1,000 kilometers. And this is kind of a quasi-geographic arrangement, I would call it, because it has a notion of geographic space. And what you can see, for example, now that we are familiar with these, with how to interpret these plots, is that if it's skewed to the left, it means there is more built-up growth than population grows, and this is something that you can see in Europe, that you can also see in North America, whereas if it's skewed to the right, population grows faster than built up, and this is something that you can see in Africa, for example, also Southeast Asia, and the more red we see, the more urban it is, right? If we see these plots here in China, for example, where they're actually like this shape, that means population is shrinking. We also observe this in parts of Eastern Europe, here, for example. So that's just one way to graphically convey data from 3 of our time series, right? The global data set. So there's the built-up surface is in there, the population is in there, and the degree of urbanization. And then all the time periods contribute to this plot here. How is this done? It's no rocket science. It's really just simple matplotlib. There are modules called offset image and annotation bbox, where you can basically place an image at an XY location. So each image that we write to file is annotated or is associated with a coordinate, right? So we can just load that in a loop and then plot this. So this is one way to kind of make non-spatial data visualization spatial, right? By arranging it in such a geographic space. We can go further and, for example, apply a similar concept for individual cities. So what we see here is basically a quasi-geographic arrangement of, I think it's 81 cities. And by quasi-geographic, I mean the upper left is northwest, the lower right is southeast. So Southeast Asia, Australia down there, and North America up there, right? And we can then visualize these for different points in time. And you can see at one glance the spatial detail of the data, right? So you can see the shape, the pattern of each individual city, but you can also observe like global trends, which is, in this case, of course, the growth of cities predominantly in Asia, Southeast Asia, China, right? Also North America, if you look at Atlanta, for example, has grown a lot. So that's another way to kind of combine local spatial detail with a global picture, right? Now, how is this done? It's really just a grid that I define manually just by browsing the world map and writing it into a list of lists. So again, this would be the upper. Do you see the mouse actually? No, sorry. Yeah, so Anchorage in the upper left and Auckland, Sydney in the lower right, right? So we define lists of lists, and then we actually use geonames to retrieve coordinates for each city just by string matching. Since it's just a small amount of data, we can flag if there is like a mismatch, if some misspelling or whatever, and then you can fix it. So once we have the coordinates, we extract the subset from our data. Then we use a very useful function from GeoPandas, which is the estimate UTM CRS, which basically gives you the EPSG code of the UTM projection for each of these cities. So we don't want to show it in the Mollweite projection because cities in the extremes are very distorted. So we automatically transform or reproject the rasters to the local UTM zone. That's what you see here. Yeah, and then we visualize it in Matplotlib using a multi-panel figure and imshow, and then save these to file for each year, and then use, for example, image.io to merge them into an animated GIF. And here we see some more animated GIFs that can be produced. This is Accra, Ghana, where you can nicely see how the city has grown over time. So the same concept, basically, we take a area of interest, we crop the data, we reproject it, and then we merge it into an animated GIF. The same here for building volume. Over time, you can basically see a similar pattern. This would be the population layer. So where you can see high density population versus lower density in the outskirts. And then this would be the degree of urbanization, which is spatially coarser. So this is produced at 1 kilometer spatial resolution. And red is basically what is considered an urban center according to this definition. And you can nicely see how it grows towards the inland and how it pushes basically the suburban or peri-urban areas, the yellow ones, further out, right? You can nicely see the growth pattern. Yeah, what else? We can also combine spatial and non-spatial visualization in such an animation. It's also native Matplotlib. We just create a plot with two subplots, right? Use imshow to show the data on the left, and then horizontal bar chart to show these pyramids to the right. I'm also overlaying, I'm not sure if you can see this, some hillshade layer here, which is the COPDEM, so it's the Copernicus digital elevation model that we kind of processed to get a global hillshade layer in the same spatial resolution. Yeah, so we can look at this here, but we can also compare this for different places, which is also interesting. To the north, you can on top you can basically see two places in the global north, so a region in the US and then a region in Germany, and then at the bottom you see Sao Paulo and the Nile Delta in Egypt, and you can see these trends that we've observed earlier, the skew of these kind of bars, towards the left, so more population than more built up than population in the north, and more population than built up in the south, right? So the next thing that I want to show is a little bit some more kind of animation that I was playing around with. It's also just pure Matplotlib. So we basically use Sentinel-2 composite and kind of use this blend over effect into our data, into the GHSL data. So we can show the growth of the city, which is informed by historical Landsat data. Now we change the alpha of the layer programmatically, and then by changing basically the bounding box of the shown extent, we can kind of pan across the land. And now we're in Lagos, Nigeria. So we blend from the Sentinel data into the built-up surface in 2018, and then we show the kind of the evolution based on the or informed by the Landsat archive. So yeah, and this is, as I said, all pure Matplotlib. So we just systematically vary the set xlim, set ylim parameters that define the extent that is shown, right? So we can zoom out, we can zoom in, we can do like a scaling or a translation, which would be then a zoom in, zoom out, or a panning effect. Then ImShow has this alpha parameter, which is basically the opacity of the layer, so we can vary this systematically in a for loop, and then export everything, and then glue it together to an animated GIF. Okay, so what I'm currently working on is to really automate this for basically every city in the world. And to do that, we use the Urban Center database, which is also a product of the GHSL team. It's basically derived from this degree of urbanization framework, a database of what is considered a city according to that classification scheme, attributed with many different attributes from different data sets, also from third-party data sets. So it's a data integration exercise. And for each of those, I'm currently playing around with how to produce such animations in an automated fashion. This is how it currently looks like. We're looking here at Dhaka, Bangladesh. So we have built up surface, built up volume, building volume, population, and the degree of urbanization. I learned a lot yesterday in the talk about the EO maps, and I was not even aware of Cartopia, I have to say. So what this scale bar that you see is actually very small. It's because I coded it by hand. Also, the north arrow is done manually. So, you know, just taking the average location of this place, transforming it into WGS, creating a line, reprojecting it back, and then you get like a, you know, the rotated line that points towards north. So here is some other visualization of building volume for a different set of cities. You can also see Basel down there. Maybe we can zoom in here for Kinshasa, which is also quite interesting to look at. It has a very particular growth pattern. So yeah, this is all produced fully automatically. Still working on improving that, and then hopefully we can deploy this and produce this for each city and also for regular tiles. So another advantage of just using Matplotlib is that if you run this on a server, you don't have many dependencies. Lastly, we want to look at the bigger picture. So we produce global data. So we want to also show these data sets on the globe. So, and I've seen recently a lot of these visualizations in social media, but I guess most of them are made using Blender or some other tools that I have to say I'm not familiar with. So the pipeline here is basically we take the global data set already downsampled to 30 arc seconds. We create a range of custom orthographic projections, right? So we're just modifying the projection string. Then we would use GDAL warp to warp the data set into each of these custom orthographic projections. So that gives you the picture around the globe, and then you just glue it together to an animated GIF. This is the same, but incorporates also a temporal domain. So we move, we stop, then we show the data over time, then we continue. Yes, so that's it. Maybe concludingly, we've seen that animated data visualization is a powerful tool to communicate high-level scientific findings, also to non-expert audiences. We think that if you're a data producer, your data production process does not end with the data publication, just throwing it out there, but also by, you know, developing suitable data visualization strategies in order to increase popularity and disseminate scientific findings. We've seen that basic Python can do this, and we hope that such tools can be used to foster evidence-based political decisions in general. And that's it, so thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Johannes. Very visual, very nice, very attractive, I found. And it's nice to see where the tax money goes into something very useful, right? So just one question, are you working on this alone, or are you like a team, or how do we have to picture that?
Okay, so the team that produces the global human settlement layer has around 15 people.
All right.
But one of my tasks or projects is this kind of visualization thing. So what we've seen, it's all produced by myself.
And is it shown to the politicians or to the planners, or who's the target audience that will work with what you've done and shown?
Well, I mean, for now it's still in development, but we use it, for example, when there are a lot of delegations from other countries coming to visit the Joint Research Center, and then we would typically prepare some of these animations from their home countries or home cities to show for the moment. But as I mentioned, we want to kind of provide a web-based tool where the user, anyone, can basically click on a city and then would see these animated GIFs, which we would pre-compute and store on a server side. So,
thank you. Yes. Thanks a lot. With regard to time and keeping the schedule, I would say if you have questions, please address him individually. And I would like to introduce the next presentation.